Welcome, one and all, to the world's finest show. I'm your friendly neighborhood Kyle Hudson.
And I'm Ray Gordon.
And today we have a very fun show for you. We actually have a LA-based comedian named Jeff Plitt. He's going to be joining us in the second half of the show, all the way from California. So I'm pretty excited. We're going to have kind of a fun show. I think we need to, get back to our roots a little bit. And
You ever been to California?
I've actually been to California, well, twice. Once when I was a kid, and then when my wife and I went on our honeymoon, we stopped over in San Diego and did instead of getting a straight through, like a connecting flight, we took a flight to San Diego, and then we took a flight from San Diego to Hawaii so that we could, because we went to a honeymoon in Maui. And so we did one day in San Diego. It was amazing. What about you?
I have been to California once, and that was when my sister went to FIDM, the Fashion and Design Institute that's in, Los Angeles.
Okay.
So I got off of the LAX. I did the whole California. I was in California, and I ate at California Pizza Kitchen, and I have no shame. It was delicious.
Dude,
and the moon was tremendous. It was
the what?
I think we went during the harvest moon, and the moon was about the size of a skyscraper. It was grandiose in the sky. I'll never forget it.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with, I went to film school, so part of the original plan was to go to LA and stuff like that. I just never got around to it. And yeah, it'll be an interesting interview, especially because, and I'll bring it up probably in the interview, that our paths kind of took, he started in tech and then went into the entertainment industry, and I kind of started in the entertainment industry, went into tech. So it'll be interesting. So make sure you stay tuned for the rest of the show, for the second half of the show, for the interview. But yeah, so there's been a lot happening that we haven't talked about because, we've been talking about a lot of serious topics recently, which I felt like we should have. But, we also should probably talk about the new PlayStation 5 that's coming out. Because,
really?
Yeah. Dude, have you heard of they are coming out with like a Miles Morales expansion to Spider-Man? Because I know you just got Spider-Man on PlayStation 4.
Yes.
And so you've been swinging through New York. And they're going to actually have like a full standalone expansion just focusing on Miles. And I don't want to spoil it for you or any of the people at home, but
like a DLC.
Sounds awesome. Well, so it's going to be like DLC, but more like a massive, like how Monster Hunter World had like a DLC that like changed everything. That's what it's saying that it's going to be. In the beginning, it was downplayed, but it sounds like it's actually going to be pretty big. And I don't know. Out of all the PlayStation 5 news that's come out, that's definitely been the one that's most exciting for me. I really want to tell myself that I will get a PlayStation 5 when it comes out, although, I have a kid now, so it's not like when the PlayStation 4 came out. Well, when the PlayStation 4 came out, yeah, right? Like in, what was it? Eastbound and Down, he gets his like baby son a PlayStation 3. But yeah, no, I mean, like last time when PlayStation 4 came out, I like literally had just won thousands of dollars on a game show. And it was the first thing I bought was that game system. I literally, the day I got the check, I went online and I was like, sure, $600.
PlayStation 4.
Right. So I don't know if I could do that, especially because like now I have a kid and, with the economy being what it is. But I will, it will be definitely high on my list to check out. And speaking of which, there's a couple the people who made, I know the other day you and I were talking about, pretty good, like really great games on PlayStation 4, and you were talking about Infamous Second Son, which if you haven't played it, it's like a $5 game. It's seriously, it was a launch title. And I mean, Ray, right? Like it's the most superhero game I've ever played before I played Spider-Man.
There are game concepts that don't stick the landing. That like you can't like keep making more games off of. One of those being Star Wars: The Force Unleashed. That was also a game that had a original game and then a sequel. Infamous and then Infamous Second Son figured it out where Star Wars: The Force Unleashed sort of dropped the ball. The second game is just as fun as the first.
Well,
and it blew me away.
But you got to think about it. It's easier probably to make something original. Whereas where in, Star Wars, they have to deal with the Star Wars license, which comes with rules. When you're doing something like Infamous, It's kind of its own thing. It has a very X-Men feel to it. But I
Kind of
don't
like
know.
more like the Inhumans, kind of sort of like like a mutant-esque
Yeah.
feel.
Well, the reason why I thought Second Son was so great is because you like absorb different powers from different people. So like you had like 3 or 4, or I think it was actually 5 by the end of the game, power sets that you can do different things, different elements, like run through neon and stuff like that. And I don't know, as someone, see, I didn't have a PlayStation 3. I went from PlayStation 2 to PlayStation 4. So Infamous Second Son blew my mind. I was like, wait, I don't have to save?
Right? You just walk around, pause. I pause. I miss pausing. I feel like we could do a whole show on pausing and
Yeah.
how it's no longer something that happens.
Yeah. So one of the games that I have been playing a lot recently has been Heroes of the Storm. I played it a lot like a year ago. I looked it up, and actually like right before my baby was born, I was playing it a bunch, and then for some reason I stopped. But I've gotten back into it because my friends have gotten back into it, and you know I've had to say a couple times, I'm playing, and my wife's like, "Can you take out the garbage or something like that?" I'm like, "I can't pause." You know what I mean? Like I'm online and I'm playing with other people and I can't pause. And my wife, thankfully, is a gamer. So she understands. Do you know what I mean? Like my wife understands that, some games you can pause, some games you can't, right? But I can just like 10 years ago, like you said, everything, you could just stop it and continue on later. And it's just kind of something we just have lost in gaming as like just a standard, right? But it makes sense with a game like Heroes of the Storm or Destiny or any of these online games because other people are playing too. I
Right.
do remember, I can't remember what game it was, where like there's a game a couple of years ago where like you had a certain amount of timeouts. And I thought that was a clever way of getting around it, right? Like you couldn't straight up pause the game, but you could call a 3-minute timeout, which would allow you to
Do what you gotta do.
effectively pause the game. Yeah, do what you gotta do. So I can't remember what game that was. If someone does know, put it in the comments and we'll figure that out.
Because you mentioned, it's funny that you mentioned that. I know we're on Infamous Second Son, which does pause, by the way. Huh, it's great. I said I am more gravitating towards games that have that function, as opposed to, even though I love Destiny 2, and I do, and I'll play it, and I just have to remember to allot my time. Even when I play Call of Duty Zombies, it's an online sort of thing. We want to play with people, and there is no pausing. Once the round starts, you just sort of have to survive. So I don't know. I guess it's from my era that I am appreciative of a lapse in activity. I guess so I can give my brain a break.
Well, I mean, I can just say as I've gotten older, I've definitely changed the way I view games. I mean, I remember when I would see a game and it'd be like 120 hours of content, and I'd be like, yes, I am down for that. And now I read like, what was the new Dragon Age game? Not Dragon Age, Dragon Quest game that came out, and it said something like that. It was like 100. I was like, I don't have time for that. You know
Who
what I mean?
has 100 hours?
Well, then a game like Metal Gear Solid, right, where it's like literally, I mean, if you take out the cutscenes, it's probably 4 or 5 hours of actual game, right? And like that is totally more my speed. I want something I can beat in a month, right?
Right.
40 hours of gameplay. If I'm for a new game, which I don't really buy new games anymore, but if I was buying a new game for $60 and I got 40 hours of fun out of it, I would feel like I got my money's worth.
Right. Well, that's also because like the games that we used to play cost between $25 and $49.99. I mean, if I get and just seeing what was that game? It was the Avengers. The Avengers game with the pre-order. It was like this bundle for $199.99, and I said, "You're not going to get 99 cents and $199 for it."
Well, yeah. Well, that's
with
the pre-orders, because I actually been looking at the new Avengers game coming out too, because that comes out like next month. I'm gonna probably get it too. Although I've been burned enough on pre-orders that I've stopped doing it. Well, like, I mean, most recently with Final Fantasy VII, I mean, that just I couldn't get it because all the stores closed, which I understood. But there's been a few games where like I pre-ordered it and then it wasn't as good as I thought it was going to be. So although the Avengers one, I don't know, I might actually pre-order that one. But I definitely think that like the price of games were going to go up from $50 to $60 over, that's easy. But it does bother me when a game like Resident Evil 3 comes out, and I mean, it's a remake of an already existing game. Now, granted, it's a beautiful remake, but the game, I mean, if you played Resident Evil 3 back in the day, it was maybe 6 hours. And in the original game, which I did not, so I haven't played, to be completely honest, I haven't played Resident Evil 3 on PlayStation 4. But on PlayStation 1, it had like branching endings, right? Like there was multiple endings you could do, and I heard that they took that out. So like it really seems to me like you're getting an inferior product, and I could not justify paying $60 for something that is 6 hours worth of gameplay, right? Because another thing is with Avengers or a lot of these other games, there's an online mode, right? And so there's like, 40 hours of the story, and then however much time you want to sink into the online multiplayer. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I'm not as upset about the price of games because I understand how much they cost to make, but I really have gotten away from buying them day one. My backlog is so big too. I don't have time to play video games like when I was a kid anymore. You know what I mean? I got tons of games I still want to play.
Right. And it's like Infamous Second Son for me. I know I kind of was late to the party, but I've always liked the Infamous franchise.
Oh, that was a launch title. That was a launch title for PlayStation 4. That was like one of the first games. But it's a great game still, right? And that's what I don't have the need to play the newest game, with the exception of Final Fantasy VII, just because like I was
like,
ready for that.
Final Fantasy 11,
but
which is tremendous, by the way. It's tremendous.
You have that? You got it for the 7?
Buddy, I got it, and I've played it, and it's great, and it's tremendous. I haven't even gotten past. Oh, see, I'm loving the fact that it's following the old game as far as like the storyline. Loving that.
You'll see, man. I'm not going to touch that because I don't want to spoil it. It was. Let me tell you this, man. Final Fantasy VII Remake came out literally when the coronavirus hit. Like, it was literally. I mean, the reason why I couldn't get it where I pre-ordered it was because the store was closed because of the coronavirus. So like, I needed that like nostalgia hit. You know what I mean? Like, honestly, it was what I needed at that exact moment. It helped me really get through the tougher earlier parts of this whole crisis, was being able to just like switch off and visit Midgar and like go hang out with Tifa and Barrett for a little bit. Like, I do have a question though. I do have a question. What are your feelings on Barrett's voice acting and his overall character? Because like, I don't know, man. I always thought that Barrett was a little questionable when it came to their characterization of a alpha black male. And I thought they would tone it back with the remake, but they kind of doubled down.
He is, and his phenotype is generally seen in most anime and most video games of anime. The depiction of the African American male in an anime setting is kind of overblown, but that's also linked to the fact that there's not as much exposure. So what you see is what you get, a lot of it. Like in America, our exposure to anime is what we are able to see. But you go over to Japan, and I guarantee you there's so many more anime. Like, there's so many more. There's such a different sect that it would blow your mind, but it's like, it's all about exposure. So when I see Barrett in the Final Fantasy VII Remake, I am sympathetic and empathetic to the fact that, like, hey, at the time, they only really saw, like, that late 80s, early 90s hit.
Yeah, but that was at the time. And now when he's still like,
it's a remake.
I don't know, man. I'm not going to make the voice. I really don't feel comfortable doing that. But like the
me
way
personally, I switched it over. I switch when I get a game and it is from a different era, a different region. I switch over to their voice acting and I get their subtitles. Because A, I want to give a respect for respect is due. B, I love the fact that even even with the cutscenes, the mouths move different for the American talking and with the Japanese language inserted. So it's like they really pulled out all the stops. So when I started hearing the yeah, I'm the whoa, I was like, let me switch this. Let me switch this. At least then I can like bypass it and be like, okay, that shit, it is what it is.
Yeah,
It is what it is.
Right, and it was like, oh man, I kind of hoped you would fix that, and I just hope that maybe part 2 they do a little bit better of a job, because I don't know, I did feel it was
It's
a
a
little
remake.
insensitive, but it was a little insensitive. You know what I mean? And they could have improved it.
It wasn't, because there's a difference. Like the purists probably are like, I understand why you did it. Like it was bad then, it's bad now, but at least it's updated bad, and it sticks to the plot, right? I kind of wouldn't have been able to agree with it if Barrett was like this kind, concerned, sensitive.
Yeah,
Like
but he didn't
I'm
have
gonna hear your feelings. No, that's not Barrett.
I know, but I mean, like, dude, you could have gone like a Vin Diesel route with him.
He's got a
You know what I
machine
mean?
gun.
Yeah,
As a
but dude,
bomb.
no. Okay, but the machine gun arm thing, and if you haven't played Final Fantasy VII, I don't really want to spoil it to you because we're all going to be replaying it over the next decade. But that scene, when you find out how he got the machine gun arm, that's one of the best moments in the game, dude. I mean, that hits. That part, and I think that'll be in the next part, which is why I really don't want to.
Emotional. Yeah, Final Fantasy landed the emotional ties to video games. They landed it like this. I have conversations at work, at my job, with grown people of varying ages, older than me, who regaled me with tales of Final Fantasy VII and its predecessors. And I'm just like, I wasn't even around for them, but I loved the games. Like I can only imagine when they came out.
Have you played Final Fantasy VI?
Yeah, I actually saw it played, and that's what got me enticed to play Final Fantasy VII. I was like, oh, okay, I like the turn-based nature. I like how it's, like it'll get you thinking. It'll get you playing. It'll get you acting. It's kind of great. It gets you feeling. Well, I love a game that can make you feel.
I was talking because my wife and I do play video games together, and I was telling her we should, play one of the older Final Fantasies. And I still have Final Fantasy IX, for PlayStation. I have PlayStation 2, and I was like, but the thing is, it's not voice acted. Back then you had to read everything, and I was like, it's kind of like reading a book. You know what I mean? It's kind of like it is a game that you read, and there's a lot of text. It's a lot of reading. And I do think something was lost in between Final Fantasy IX and Final Fantasy X when they went from the reading to the voice acting. And I also thought it was another strange thing that they didn't bring back the voice cast that they've been using for like ever. I don't know if you knew this, but you remember the movie She's All That?
Yes.
The girl from that movie had been the voice of Tifa for like the last decade.
Didn't know that.
Right?
Wow. Way to make money.
Yeah, I forget her name. But yeah, she was definitely the voice of Tifa for like ever. But I mean, talking about a backlog, I still haven't even gotten around to playing Last of Us 2. Have you played that? Have you played Last of Us original?
I have heard my coworkers talking about this game for months. When it gets to that horror thriller genre, I get kind of hesitant because I like to play games where if I'm gonna be scared, it's not gonna be because of some horror. It's gonna be because some type of jump scare come up. Like I'll play Devil May Cry.
See, I will say this, that Last of Us, and I don't know about the second one, but the first one, everyone should play. It is seriously, it's a horror game in the vein of Resident Evil. It's I actually describe it a lot to people as Resident Evil 20 years later, both story-wise and technology-wise, right? Like you have, it is a 20-year later game, and the story takes place 20 years after something like in Resident Evil happens, right? So it's really interesting in that respect. But the story, man, honestly, outside of an RPG, I don't think I've ever seen a story that good. Like, it blows every Zelda game out of the water. I mean, on an emotional level.
Wow.
Let me tell you this: it is one of only 2 video games to ever make me cry.
Wow.
Final Fantasy VII and Last of Us. And it is a game that looks at the consequences of your actions in a way that, again, RPGs do, but they do it through like a, if you do this, then that happens. If you do this, then that happens.
Yeah.
Last of Us is a story it's trying to tell you, so it's not a sandbox game like Grand Theft Auto, but the story is about the consequences of your actions, and it is like literally masterfully told. It's like a movie. The only other games that I put on a narrative level is like Detroit Become Human. Actually, Spider-Man is a very good game narratively. Do you know Dan Slott, who wrote Spider-Man? He's the second longest writer on Spider-Man ever. He wrote a lot of Spider-Man the game.
Thank you.
Well, that's why it sounds so accurate to the comics and stuff like that. It actually comes from his. There's a lot of the stories are inspired by. It's not a direct sequel, but if you read these comics, if you want to play Spider-Man, you want to read The Gauntlet, and it's a series of stories told by both Dan Slott and Mark Waid, and it's essentially in the comics. Kraven the Hunter wants to hunt Spider-Man, and so he figures out a way to get a bunch of villains to essentially attack Spider-Man over and over and over again. So it's like one guy right after the other, and they call this series of several mini stories, they call it The Gauntlet, and it's considered one of the best Spider-Man stories. And it literally touches on all the big ones. The Rhino, the Vulture, Shocker, Mysterio, all the ones that show up in the game. You could almost read like those comic books because you start like 8 years in, so all of this stuff already happened years ago. So you can kind of read those comics as background for Spider-Man.
Oh wow, didn't know that. I had to do a lot more world study when it comes to Spider. Because Spider-Man, while I love it, I really don't have much exposure to it outside of a few sparse random comics and the movies. Even the games only had a little bit of it. Like that's why I'm playing this new Spider-Man game. Well, I don't know about new, but new for me. It's kind of getting me re-caught up to the mastery of the web slinging one. You know what I mean? It's really funny.
Spider-Man's my favorite superhero for a reason. I mean, he's relatable. You know what I mean? Like
he told jokes. He told jokes every time. Like not like Deadpool, but
that's
snarky.
It's a perfect amount. You know what I mean? Like he's clever, he's smart, but he's also an everyman, and he also has bills to pay. Unlike Tony Stark or Bruce Wayne, who are like millionaires, right? Like he has a job usually as a photographer or a teacher, or you know what I mean? He's working class. He's blue collar.
Definitely blue collar.
Speaking of Spider-Man, have you heard the rumor about Spider-Man 3 who's going to be showing up? So, Spider-Man, I'm not going to spoil the ending of Spider-Man 2 Far From Home in case you haven't seen it yet, but let's just say at the end, he's going to need a lawyer.
Yeah.
So the original theory was that it was going to be She-Hulk, because She-Hulk is going to have a Marvel, a Disney Plus show, and that it would be a perfect way to introduce She-Hulk into the series. But they're thinking they're going to go another route, because Spider-Man is very close friends with another, in the comics, he's very close friends with another street-level superhero, Daredevil. And they might bring back Charlie Cox as Daredevil in the new Spider-Man movie.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, yeah. And that is so exciting to me. Now, that will be like interesting because the Netflix show's relationship to the MCU has always been tangential, we'll say.
Yeah.
They in the opening scenes of Daredevil, and I think in Jessica Jones, they do reference the incident, right? Which is taken to be the invasion of New York that takes place in the first Avengers movie. but it's never explicitly said, and none of them ever interact with them, so it's kind of been its own thing. But if Charlie Cox shows up as Daredevil, that's direct connective tissue that we've never had with the Netflix series. And I also heard that Ritter, the woman who played Jessica Jones, is also in talks to come back.
Yeah.
And it seems like they're going to recast Luke Cage and Iron Fist.
Terrible for that.
I know.
Luke Cage, but
I like them both as actors. I mean, I did not hate.
If you're going to get rid of both, if I had to lose, if in order to lose Iron Fist, I had to lose Luke Cage as well, I would be like, so be it. I guess that's what they did. It was more like, fine.
Well, because they're heroes for hire. That's like they're a team. You know, like the two of them should have teamed up in the series if that was how it continued. I like that actor. He's in a new show called Evil, which I haven't had a chance to check out. But
I think I did just hear.
He plays like a priest or something like that. It looks interesting on CBS. But yeah, man, I am. I was disappointed to see that because I really did, and they left the season 2 of Luke Cage on such a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
But you know, you're gonna see Bushmaster soon. Well, I guess production is going to be on pause for a little bit longer now because you know what his next role is. It's going to be another Netflix show.
Really?
He's going to be Jet Black, dude. He's going to be Jet Black in Cowboy Bebop with John Cho. John Cho is going to play Spike.
Yeah. Great. That's great. That's great.
Yeah, dude. I am so excited for that. And also, speaking of Netflix shows, you know what just came out? Season 2 of Umbrella Academy. So if you're looking for something to watch, I mean, Umbrella Academy came out last year, and we gave it glowing reviews on the show. I'm sure the second season, if it follows the comic books, will be superb.
Tremendous.
The second comic book, again, I can't really give spoilers because I haven't seen the show, but in the comics, because the comics are written by Gerard Way, who did My Chemical Romance. He was the lead singer for My Chemical Romance. Not a fan of his music, but he writes some of the best comic books I've ever read. And in the comics, they go to Dallas and try and they get involved with the JFK assassination plot because it's all about time travel. So it'll be interesting because it was in the first series of books, it wasn't mentioned at all, but it was kind of alluded to in the second. In the first season of the TV show. And I mean, honestly, it was almost like if Wes Anderson made a superhero movie. It is really neat. You watched Umbrella Academy, right?
Yeah, I did. It was actually like, it blew my mind because it really linked up as much as it possibly could to the comic. But it was actually interesting on its own.
Yeah,
you don't have to read the comic to watch Umbrella Academy. Exactly,
and it's actually its own standalone thing. You don't need to know any. It's not like the MCU where you need to know all these other characters. It's just pretty much watch the show. It's essentially like Royal Tenenbaums meets the X-Men. That's how I describe it. But yeah.
Very funny stuff.
So I think we should probably take a break and head over to our interview with Jeff Plitt, the comedian. He has a lot of stuff, so we'll get back with him when we come back after this break. So stay tuned. We'll be back right after this.
Hi, everyone. I'm Emily Villaverde.
And I'm Zach Ging. Growing up, we had a difficult time understanding the issues that impacted us as Asian Americans. We had the questions, but didn't know where to find the answers.
So together, we created a podcast and embarked on a journey. Tune into our podcast, The Situasian Room, a show that dives deeper into Asian America through hard-hitting topics, cultural cuisine, and shares our own stories.
You can find us on KeystoneDigital.tv and get access to all of our content and more. Or find us on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast.
Welcome back to the World's Finest Show. I'm Kyle Hudson. Today, I'm joined all the way from California by a very special guest. Jeff Plitt is host and writer of What You Need to Know and a former Google engineer turned stand-up comedian. How are you, Jeff?
Hi, Kyle. I'm glad to be here. How are you?
Good. Now I met you on Twitter. I'll be honest, it is not the platform I am on the most. So when you invited me, you sent me a little email to your what you should know or what you need to know email that had your little bits, and I thought they were really clever. So I reached out, and I'm glad you could join us. So tell us a little bit about your journey because it's really interesting.
Sure. Well, I'll start at the beginning. So I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and my mom is a occasional actress. My dad is an MIT trained engineer, and I sort of do both. So growing up, I was coding on computers. I've always done that. I got my degree in computer science at Carnegie Mellon, but I also grew up doing acting in plays and musicals. And then in college, while I was studying to be an engineer, I was doing theater and started an improv troupe and was getting into comedy. So after that, I went to Chicago. I did Second City and Improv Olympic, sketch comedy, stuff like that. I was still doing tech as well. And then I just realized I want to focus in stand-up comedy, filmmaking, and I got an offer to work at Google. So I moved back here to LA. It was Google's LA office, and I was working on Picasa web albums, one of their old sort of Google Photos web things. And I started doing stand-up comedy, and that has been my path for the last 12 years or so, sort of rising from the bare bottom of open mics to now being sort of in the middle of a stand-up comedy career. It's not paying my bills, but I am a professional. I do make some money on it every year, mostly going to festivals and stuff like that. But along the way, I started to realize, you know what, with stand-up comedy, you write jokes and stories that are evergreen, that are about you and your life that you can tell for years. But I'm also attracted to the kind of jokes that Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel tell, like late night comedy. So I started writing jokes about the news, and that's a very different thing because those jokes get stale after a couple of weeks. You can't tell them anymore. But if you can write those, it's kind of fresh and hip to be talking about what's currently happening in the news. So I started doing that a few years ago on my own, just for Twitter, and I started to realize, there could be a career in this. So I haven't quite gotten to. One day I want to write for Bill Maher or Stephen Colbert or something like that, and I've actually submitted writing packets to both those guys, and so I keep going at that. But in the meantime, I run my own show, so it's a YouTube show. Every week I do a bunch of jokes about the news with kind of graphics, kind of like John Oliver or any of those guys that we mentioned doing their shows. Plus, sometimes I have funny interviews where a friend of mine, usually a comedian, will do. Usually it's a scripted interview where they're kind of playing a character like a mask denier. I don't know. I'm a liberal person, so I think masks are a good thing. So I sort of make fun of mask deniers. Not that I have anything wrong if you don't if you don't like wearing masks. But anyway, so that's kind of like what I'm up to now, and I still love to like use the left side of my brain as well. I've always been a math guy. I love chess, so I've always I think used both of these kind of aspects of my personality, and sometimes I put them right together, especially with filmmaking. Like with my show, when I get to play with cameras, lights, and audio, and computer editing, and all of that, but also write and perform jokes. That's when I'm happiest.
Yeah, I want to talk about your show because it does have a very late night monologue kind of feel. Very much like, I don't know, I like Conan O'Brien, how he, before the show starts, he has like the what's going on. And I think you really nail that. And I just wanted to ask you, as a guy who's like me, worked in both tech and the entertainment industry, where do you think you really, like, what are some advantages you have because you live in both worlds? Because I definitely see, some of your technical prowess coming through in some of the more technical elements of your show.
Oh, thanks. So one thing is, when I went to school for engineering and growing up, I was kind of academic. I was a nerd. I've always been attracted to puzzles and problem solving. So I taught myself to solve Rubik's cubes. Well, I read on how you solve them, but eventually I trained until I was able to do it. And I love learning how to problem solve. And so yes, that can be a nerdy thing that you do as a physics or chemistry type of person, but you can also apply it to a creative endeavor. I'm very deconstructionalist. So I think a lot of comedians, they have to wait for inspiration to hit. They have to wait until one day they're walking along and go, oh, here's a great idea. But you don't have to wait. You can also develop writing techniques and use technique and sit down and have challenges and little games and things that you play to bring you to a joke, even that you didn't think that you were going to arrive at when you started. So, you know, just at that point alone with the writing process, I think I bring a little bit of tech to that. I have feeds full of news. I read hundreds of feeds, just thousands of, a couple thousand of news stories every week, just in order to figure out what the setups for my jokes are going to be. Then I take the list that I've collected of maybe a few hundred setups, and I go, which of these are going to be good jokes? I finally write maybe 20 or 30 jokes, or I would call them joke attempts because some of them are terrible. I bounce them off friends and I figure out, okay, these are the 15 I'm going to shoot. Finally, I shoot maybe 15 and I keep maybe 8 to 10 for the show. So I'm very attracted to any process where you brainstorm and you inflate your possibilities, and then you cut and whittle down and hone your possibilities. So writing is like that. Sculpture is like, any sort of art where you can add and take away. I'm really into those refined sort of art forms. But then, of course, as I am shooting the show, I was a filmmaker, so I learned how to set up, 3-point lighting with a key and a fill. And if you've seen my show, there's this fun, like, sort of purple light in the back that gives it's just my living room. And I just live in a typical apartment, but I've found a way to make it kind of look a little nicer than usual. And
well, that actually
yeah,
makes me think of something, because one of the things that really struck me when I was doing research on you is, like, you're very entrepreneurial. And one of the things I always tell people is, like, you have to kind of create chances for yourself. And I was wondering how you kind of create those chances for yourself. Like, what are the things you do? Like you said, you just set this up in your living room, but you add this one little light and it adds a little accent, and people sometimes get constricted by their own thinking. So what do you do to find those little points of inspiration that allow you to then take action and then create the next thing?
You said it very well, Kyle. I think you have to create your own opportunities. If you wait for opportunities to drop in your lap, you might have 2 or 3 in your lifetime. Sure, that does happen. But if you're, waiting for that, you could be waiting forever. So I think it's within anyone's ability to create a YouTube show, whatever your niche is. And when the pandemic hit, I asked myself the same thing. I'll bet you did, Kyle, and your audience, any of your listeners, is like, maybe you're lucky and you can work from home and, nothing's really changed. But for most of us, life has changed dramatically in this pandemic. And so I couldn't do stand-up comedy, and many things in my life sort of changed. And I for 2 months, I was slightly depressed, didn't know what to do. And then it sort of hit me, because I'd been doing filmmaking, I'd been doing stand-up comedy. I went, oh, you know what I should do? I should do some kind of show where I am just every week putting out a little episode where I can put together some jokes. And I think the idea really came through because I'd already been preparing to be a writer for late night. So I had the jokes figured out, and I'd already been a filmmaker. So it was really just putting it together. I never really put myself on camera very much. There's almost no footage of me on the web, besides a few stand-up clips and 1 or 2, brief TV appearances where I did like a line or 2 out there. So this is the first time, because I've been mostly being behind the camera. So this is the first time where I kind of put all those things together. But I do believe you have to create your own opportunities, whatever it is. If you want to be a book author, you want to be a writer, you want to be a musician in the arts, or if you want to be a fitness person or a business person, being entrepreneurial is the best advice I can give to have the outcome of your life be in your control, so you're not waiting for other people. You can also, if you are really good at what you do, you can rise through the ranks of a company as an employee, and that's absolutely totally works too. But if you want to maximize your chances to be fully in control of your life and choose exactly what you want to do, I think entrepreneurialism is exciting. I've also had a lot of my own failures. I've had businesses that I started that failed, and so you have to be willing to deal with that too.
Yeah, but we don't talk about those. One of the things I always tell people, like, working in the entertainment industry, is we are very lucky to be doing, is the entertainment industry is, like, literally at its core lying to people. And I think that sometimes like you just described how much work you put into a show that is probably 7 or 10 minutes long. And it's totally deceptive how easy, if you're doing it right, it can be to people. And I think you really explained it well. This isn't something you have to put in a lot of work, right? And so what would you say you do, like, is your creative process, and how do you keep yourself on track so you can put out an episode every week? Because as a guy who puts out a show every week, it's like some weeks you're like, yeah, let's do it. But other weeks you're like, all right. So how do you stay on the ball and keep yourself going?
Well, I have two things jump to my mind. First, about procrastination. I've procrastinated sometimes. One thing that I find that helps is giving yourself permission to not do anything on your to-do list except stare at it. If I don't want to actually start a project, or let's just say there's something on my to-do list and I'm just too lazy to do it. Instead, I will say for 10 minutes, I'm just going to think about it. I'm just going to look at it and think about it and maybe take some notes on it, but I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to think about it. And that tends to wake up my ability the next time to actually take a chunk out of it and do some of it. Another thing is I'm really into formats where the audience pulls it out of you, so I had this sensation while I was doing stand-up, and I started from the beginning, do it at open mics. The first 30 times I got on stage were terrible, but I had this feeling like this is going to get better. And so finally I had a good show, someone high-fived me and they got lots of laughs. I'm like, yes, this is going to work. And it got better from there. But so lately, I think over the last few years, where most of the time I feel like I do decently well now that I've been doing it for 10 years, you have this sensation that the audience is pulling it out of you and the audience is telling you what to do. And so on the other hand, my show is still in its beginning stages in terms of building an audience. On TikTok, I have a few million views with the clips from the show. But on YouTube, I have some of the videos have just a few hundred views. So
talk about TikTok, because I'll be honest, as a guy, my friend forced me to download it just the other day, and I'm just messing around with it. And my other co-host, Ray, he doesn't really mess with TikTok either. So as someone who's creating content for TikTok, how is that? I mean, you're getting a lot of response. So how is that different from the other ways that you've been putting out stuff?
Well, I think TikTok's great for a few key reasons. First of all, it's closest to Instagram. It's somewhat similar to Instagram, I would say, if you think about what it does. If Instagram was not about photos but about videos. YouTube came from the web at first, and it was like a desktop. It's like landscape oriented. So adapting YouTube to an app kind of worked. But when I use YouTube, I don't know, I can't easily find things to watch. And it's not effortless. But TikTok is like, what if YouTube was the UI of Instagram and as easy to use as just flicking a thumb and, oh, you see my cat. So TikTok, a couple things that are interesting about it. It's 1 minute max, and you're not looking at thumbnails and choosing what to play. You're just on a stream, and so things surprise you. Another thing, though, is it's a bit of a meritocracy. What they do is they give every video, I think, a few hundred views for free, just to test it out and measure how much strangers like it, and then they reward you with either going viral or not. So I think that's very interesting. A lot of other apps don't really figure that out. And so if my cat gets pretty annoying, just let me know.
No, it's fine.
Okay, all right.
I want to ask. I ask this of whenever I have a creative on, because I feel like when you create things, you have to draw from personal life experience, right? And if you're a filmmaker, every movie you make can't be about making movies, right? So what would you say is a job that isn't directly connected to what you do now, but you still found incredibly valuable in what you do now? Do you know what I mean? It wasn't a direct stepping stone, but you find it either a source of inspiration, or maybe you met people there that you still see. I don't know. I just feel like a lot of people have one of those jobs in the back, they were a delivery driver, or,
Yeah.
What's that for you?
I think I do connect with what you just said, because often before I was able to find short films to direct, I'm not like a huge Hollywood director. I haven't done a ton of feature films, but I've done a lot of shorts and sketches. And anyway, along the road to getting to the point where people are like, hey, Jeff, do you want to direct this? Before that, I was just a DP, a director of photography, cinematographer. So it wasn't something that I really want to do. I really don't want to be a camera guy. But I realized, you know what? This is the legwork that will make my dream work. I think I'm stealing that phrase. I think I heard that somewhere. But this is the part that I have to do in order to do the part that I want to do. And it's okay to, likewise, I edit my YouTube show that you mentioned, and I don't want to be an editor. It's only fun for me to do it from my show. And so there's those things that you don't like to do, but if you can get yourself so that you don't mind doing them, and it enables you to do your dream, or at least to do the things that you want to do without having to pay someone else to do them or wait for someone else to do it, that can keep things in your control. And so I think it's important to humble yourself and realize maybe I have to learn Photoshop, or maybe I have to be willing to go and do this or that in order to do the thing I want to do.
Oh, learning those skills, I mean, basic Adobe Suite, or even like you said, 3-point lighting, can just save you so much money. So, I always tell people, invest in yourself whenever you can, because that will pay way more dividends than any kind of money in the stock market or anything like that. So, we're kind of coming to the end. Do you have any, aside from your show, What You Need to Know, do you have any fun projects on the horizon that we should know about?
Well, I did, but a lot of them were put on pause with the pandemic. And so, I have I have a couple of feature films I'm trying to, low budget feature films that I'm trying to get made, but it's too early to talk about them. But I'll just plug my show. If anyone out there is looking for a way to catch up on the news and laugh a little bit, and I think you'd enjoy my show. It's What You Need to Know. Easiest way to find it is just to Google my name, or search YouTube for my name. That's it's easier than the title, What You Need to Know, because that's kind of a title that gets you to a lot of videos. So my name is Jeffrey with a G, Geoffrey, and last name Plitt. You can find me on Twitter, Jeffrey Plitt, Instagram, Jeff_Plitt. And most of the jokes that I do on my show, I also tweet out with kind of photos to illustrate the joke, and then those become Instagram posts. It's kind of a multi-platform strategy. But
no, it's very I'm saying you're doing well, man. You're everywhere.
Thanks. And then I have the companion newsletter. What I do is, in my newsletter, I don't share my own content. I share premium content. I share Comedy Central, stand-up, sketches from Key and Peele or Saturday Night Live, tweets by professional famous comedians and stuff. And so the newsletter is kind of fun because it's a little easier to promote the newsletter than to promote my show. I mean, I'm proud of my show, but how does some stranger even know, how good my show is or whatever? So what I often do is I will tweet out my newsletter and people will connect with that. And then I will mention to them, hey, also check out my show. In the bottom of the newsletter, there's a small little link to my show, but the newsletter is mostly the coolest stand-up and sketches and jokes and stuff and memes that I found that week. So those are my two projects right now. The newsletter for promoting other people's things is how I give back to the community, is curating this newsletter, and then my show.
Well, and I will say the newsletter is a blast. I get it. And it is great because so many of the things I get in my email inbox are like super depressing. So it's nice to have something that's like super positive and always makes me laugh. So thank you so much, Jeff. I really appreciate you coming and taking the time to speak with us, and keep up the good work. And if you have any of those super secret projects coming out, let me know and we'll bring you back on.
Awesome. This is a pleasure, Kyle. I can't wait to come back.
All right. I want to again thank Jeff for taking the time to call us all the way from California. Ray, so what you got going on this weekend? You got any fun stuff? Any recommendations maybe for the people?
My recommendations so far, I had just recently watched The Old Guard on Netflix. A tremendous movie. It made me feel a lot of emotions. And the story concept was pretty excellent too. It had a slow beginning, but it once it turned, there was no turning back.
That's the one about the Immortals, right? It's about Immortals.
Right. The originals on this, also on Netflix. Netflix is just raking in. It's a story about the original vampires and how at the very beginning they had returned to Louisiana, New Orleans, so they call it. And it's just a vampire versus werewolf versus witches sort of war that happens, but it's all happening on the undercurrent. And New Orleans. It's a pretty interesting tale, like the original vampires. And then there's other vampires, but the original ones have lived for so long.
Didn't True Blood take place in Louisiana?
Louisiana is where a lot of like magical what's it's happening.
Swamp Thing took place in Louisiana too. Well,
how about you? Anything?
I was gonna say, you know, I mentioned it earlier, the Umbrella Academy. But also, and this is not my normal thing, but it is a very unique, different kind of true crime show. If you have HBO Max or HBO, there's a show called I'll Be Gone in the Dark, and it's a true crime about the like a serial killer from like the 70s who was actually was his identity. He was hidden. No one had found him. No one had caught him for like 30, 40 years. And then independent crime investigator, like blogger, actually figured out his identity and helped catch him. But she unfortunately died while she was writing the book. But her husband was Patton Oswalt, the comedian. And so he used his resources to finish her book, and then they caught this guy, and he got arrested and is now going through trial. And
wow.
Yeah, it's actually really fascinating because it's equal parts about the crimes, but also about this woman and her pursuit of this crazy, like she has these crazy theories, and the way she figures this guy out is like pretty fascinating. And I believe the series finale, it's only like 6 episodes, I think is this weekend on Sunday. So if you're into that kind of thing, which I know is not everyone's type of tea, and honestly, I do watch a couple of true crime stuff, but it's not like my big thing. But because it's like Patton Oswalt is interviewed in it, it's a very interesting tone.
Right.
It's very different from like The Staircase or The Jinx or something like that. I think it makes it more approachable, but it is about very graphic things. So if that is not your cup of tea, then I definitely would stay away from that and do more of an Umbrella Academy. Or, you know what? Watch Lost. It's been 10 years. Watch Lost. My friend, dude, the other day, my friend Tarek, he moved to America like 6 years ago, right? So he wasn't in America when Lost was on TV. And the other day he called me up and he's like, Kyle, you have to check out this show. It's called Lost. It's about these people who crash on an island and there's a smoke monster. And I was like, Tarek, I used to write for Lostpedia. Like that was literally, I mean, I didn't get paid for anything like that, but I was like I was a huge contributor on Lostpedia. And I've seen every episode of Lost like 3 or 4 times. And I was like, you haven't seen it? And he's like, yeah, we're at this point where we found this guy and he came in a balloon. His name was Henry Gale and they captured him. And I'm like, oh, I can't say anything, Tarek. Call me when you finish the season. So yes, I think it's on Netflix. So watch Lost. I mean, especially look, you got all this time to kill. It's more about the journey than the ending. I love the last episode of Lost, but not everyone does. Just be aware of that. But if you like, you know, something that really makes you think, Lost will give you. It's like 3 23-episode seasons and then 3 10-episode seasons. So it's like 100 episodes. All right. So that brings us to the end of our show. I want to thank Jeff Plitt for calling in from California. I want to thank the listeners for tuning in. We do this all for you. This show's been made possible by electricity and brought to you by
Light.
So that's it. Have fun, be safe, and until next week.
Keep geek.
The world's finest show. The world's finest show. The world's finest show.